Hello and welcome back. I have been really slack with updating everyone on what I have been reading recently, so I haven't updated anyone on what I've read since the end of January. So obviously, Feb and March. So we're doing a wrap up today of all the books I've read since February until now. Timely because it's the end of March. I have tried to film this video once before already and my birds are too loud for that to happen, so I've had to lug all of my books and all of my equipment downstairs where it is not loud. My voice sounds like I have been smoking a pack a day for 60 years and I had a COVID test this morning. I'm currently in isolation till I get my results back and hello. That's where we're at right now. So I will endeavor to not make this video super long, mostly for the sake of my voice, but also because we have 9 books to talk about today and I don't want that to go on forever. Where do I start? So I have actually done a few reading vlogs for some of the February books that I have read. So I actually won't speak too much to those books and I will leave the links of those videos in the description down below if you wanted to check those out to have a bit more of an explanation of what I thought. But let's just start because I keep rambling and I can't sustain this for that long. Are you right? I'm trying to do a thing here and you're not helping. Okay, the first book that I completed in February was Law by Alexandra Bracken. I have an in-depth, reading vlog on this book when I read it. I read this book because it was the January pick for the Booksplosion book club and I did not finish it in time to watch the live show and have not subsequently read any of the books from that book club since. Law is an urban fantasy type book that touches on Greek mythology. It follows a girl named Law, obviously, who is a descendant of a Greek god, and every 7 years the gods get thrust into mortal bodies on Earth and their descendants try to hunt and kill them to take their places as the god. Our main character, Law, is trying to escape that world at the start of this book, but then is forced back into it when she encounters someone from her past and has a goddess dying on her front doorstep. I really enjoyed the concept of this book. I think it was really new and something that I hadn't really encountered before, which was really nice. It was quite refreshing. I enjoyed that it was a standalone, but I really just didn't love the ending of the book. I think this book was very well paced. There was always something happening. There wasn't a lot of filler throughout it. But as I said, the ending just didn't feel right and I feel like it could have been paced out a bit slower than what it was. I gave this book a 4.75 out of 5 stars and that is mostly due to the ending not being the greatest, but otherwise it was a really good book and I really enjoyed it. The next book I finished, again, I think that I have a reading vlog with this in it somewhere, and it's Overton by Isabel Carmody. This is the first book in a 7-book series. I have read this series before, probably about 9 years ago now. Overton is a fantasy kind of story, and I say kind of for future reasons. It's a fantasy story following a group of people called misfits, and they are people with extra abilities, so they can read minds, coerce people into doing things, understand and feel emotions, speak to animals, those kinds of things. And they all get sent to this place called Overton, which is this really dark, mysterious place that no one really wants to go to. This book is the start of the series and it follows our main character Elspeth Gordy, who is a misfit, who gets sent to Overton and follows her journey being introduced to that world and also uncovering what the story is actually about. Very introductory, this book. Again, I read it 9 years ago and I think because I have grown as a reader, my ranking of this series is actually going to go down a little bit. It still holds a very, very close place in my heart, but I found this book really challenging to read because it was so introductory, and when I first read it I think I loved it so much because it was so different to what I had read before, but I have since read more things that are similar to this and don't love this as much. It is a very good introductory book. On the other hand, the character introduction is fantastic and I remember that I liked this series because of the characters. The story itself is quite good and rich, but it doesn't get introduced really until book 3. When I first started rereading this, I was very excited because I was jumping back into this series and getting to relearn about the characters in the world. I didn't expect to not like it as much as I did the first time I read it, which was an interesting development. It is definitely a late 90s, early 2000s book. There are some things in this that just wouldn't fly these days. It's really only present in this book, having read the subsequent 4 books since. There were parts in this that were genuinely really creepy. I don't remember it being that creepy when I was little, but it is. And I think knowing what I know now about this book is the reason that I kept going, but if this was the first time I was reading this, I probably wouldn't have continued with the series. It's only because I know that it gets better as to why I kept going. So if you are reading this series and you aren't loving it, it does get better at about book 3. So persevere through books 1 and 2, which I will talk about soon, and then keep going, because it is a very, very good series once you get into the nitty-gritty of everything. But my reread of this, I gave this a 3.75 out of 5 stars, which is a downgrade from the 4 that it was before. The next book that I read is going to be very controversial. It's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I didn't like this book. I read this because everyone held it in such high standing at the end of last year, and I didn't like it. So The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is a story that follows a girl named Addie LaRue who trades her soul to be free of the life that she's in. It's the initial setting is in like the 1800s, and she's being arranged to be married to someone she doesn't want to marry. So the god that ends up bestowing this gift upon her basically makes it so that anyone that encounters her forgets her as soon as they walk away. I enjoyed some parts of this book. However, it was a nothing book for me. I found that the story was a bit lacking. I really didn't love either of the main characters. The most interesting character was this weird god person, and he was in it only very fleetingly at parts, even though he was quite integral to the story. It was super slow. It took me so long to get into it, and then I had to actually force myself to finish it because I was hoping that it would get better. And I don't think it got any better. Normally I would love a character story where their characters are the main focus and the story is a bit lackluster. Like that normally can fly with me. But as I said, I really didn't love the main characters. I think Addie's story was fun to go through, and some of the themes that hit through history with her was really interesting, but I just didn't love it. I was really hoping that it would be one of those books that kept me thinking about it afterwards, but as soon as I finished reading it, it was out of my brain, and I was so glad for that. And I feel like this book should be read in one sitting, which I think it would have been fine if you could read it in one sitting, but I don't think that that's possible, not for me anyway. So yeah, that's a really unpopular, controversial opinion, considering everyone apparently loved this book. I just didn't love it, I'm sorry. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, which is still pretty high, but I think I did that because it was very nicely written, so that's that. The next book, on the other hand, I did love, and it was A Quarter Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas. I have a whole reading vlog about this book that has all of my in-depth thoughts, so please check that out if you want to hear more about this. But I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars because it was great, and you should read the series if you haven't. I think I rave about it like at least once a year. The next was The Farseekers by Isabel Carmody. I read this one in the physical copy as well. This is the second book to the Urban Newton series. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it basically just continues the story. We learn a bit more about what happened in what they call the before time, which is this previous civilization of people who ended up destroying the land, and they had all of these things called machines and computer machines. And Elspeth is now sort of learning a bit more about her quest to prevent the world from turning into further chaos. We start to hit a few more heavy things in this book. We have more characters introduced, we lose some characters. You're quite attached to some of the characters at this point now. I think this one is, again, still a bit more of an introductory book, but we're starting to get into more of the flesh of the story. So that's what I enjoyed about this one, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was actually an audiobook. It's the first audiobook that I have listened to since January. We have crossed into March now, by the way. I think I read this in March. We're crossed into March. We're up to March. Bridgerton, The Duke and I. I listened to this audiobook because it was the free audiobook on Audible, and I very, very nearly bought the physical copy of it the weekend before I listened to it. So I'm glad I didn't, and I'm glad that I listened to it. Oh boy, I have some thoughts. I think the show is better, and I'm not usually the person to say that. I think that the show has a lot more depth to it. The book really only focuses on Daphne and the Duke. There's no other side characters that really get involved. We don't know much about anyone else. I was really hopeful that the really icky non-consensual sex scene didn't happen in the book, but it did, and it wasn't any better. But I do also really like that we got 2 epilogues with the audiobook. We got to see the epilogue, which I guess is also covered in the show, but then we also get the epilogue that shows where the characters are like 30 years in the future, which is really cool. So if you don't know too much about that, go give it a listen. It's like fine. But if you're not super interested in the series and you're kind of just thinking, should I read it because I enjoyed the show? Don't do it, just wait for the show, because I think the book was fine, and I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. But again, coming off the back of a really bad book with a really good book, I finally got to read The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. My thoughts on this book. I will just start by saying this is one of, if not is, my favourite book now of all time. The House in the Cerulean Sea follows a man named Linus Baker, and he is a caseworker with this company that basically protects the orphanages of magical children in this world where magical beings are living alongside humans but aren't super accepted by them. And we follow Linus, who, as I said, is a caseworker and is set on a super secret assignment to go to this orphanage where the most difficult of children are sent to make sure that everything is running smoothly. There are so many fantastic characters in this book. I cannot express how much I love all of the characters in this book. There's a lot of really pressing matters that are so relevant to our current society as well, and the current oppression that some people face. There is a lot of really good found family vibes. Oh God, there goes my throat. There's a lot of camaraderie, there is character development, there's learning, there's accepting that you are able to change your opinion on things and not be a bad person for that. I loved this story so much. One thing that I noticed and also really like, there is not one heterosexual relationship in this book either, which is, yeah, pretty great. The writing in this book is very whimsical. TJ Klune did a very, very good job at making it really eloquent and different, and yeah, it felt like I was reading a storybook when I was reading a novel. I think this would be a fantastic movie if it was ever made into one. The narrator, obviously Linus Baker, very entertaining. As a 25-year adult, I found this very entertaining to read from his perspective because it goes through a lot of themes that we face when we're entering our mid-20s, early 30s, mid-30s, late 30s time. I would recommend this book to anyone who reads or doesn't read. I think that this is a book that everyone should read. Please read this book. I gave it 5+ out of 5 stars. If I could give it more, I would. It was great. And the last 2 books I will talk about as one because my voice is going and I listened to them both on audiobook, but it's books 3 and 4, Overton, Ashling, and The Keeping Place. I have 2 very different thoughts about these books. So Ashling is the 3rd book in the series, gets much more into the nitty-gritty of the story. We're starting to learn a bit more about the rebellion and what's happening with that, and we actually cross into a different land and a different setting, which was really, really lovely. Learning a bit more about all of the different cultures in this world is also a very strong point for this story. So I gave Ashling 4 out of 5 stars. I think that it's actually my favorite one so far out of the series. And The Keeping Place, I didn't love as much because most of the book is actually set at Overton, and a lot of the characters that we've grown to love are not present in this story for many different reasons. This book focuses much, much more on the rebellion and what happens in the rebellion. Oh God, get it together. The end of the book does pick up a bit more and does get a bit more enjoyable, but I think that that's kind of that 3rd act. Everything gets really exciting and wraps up kind of thing, less so enjoying the actual story of this book. I didn't like this one as much as Ashling, but I did like it a bit more than Overton, and maybe the same as the Farseekers. But I am currently really enjoying passively listening to this series and taking this in without having to focus my eyes on it because the writing is tiny and these books are huge. And that is all the books that I read in February and March. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these or if there's anything that you have read that you think I should read. Oh God. I need to stop now. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.